Good afternoon, everyone, and today is another day of learning here at UP Cebu TLRC's KUAN series. Now, for today, we are having a session about literature reviews, one of the most essential part no, in making research or in doing research. And we have a very knowledgeable and expert on this matter, as a matter of fact, a guest today. Okay, so before we start, let's have Miss Paula for our webinar netiquettes.
Webinar reminders. We will be recording the webinar for documentation, evaluation, and dissemination purposes. Note that, by attending, you are permitting us to use any form of participation for such purposes. Mute your microphone during the talk. We want to make sure that the speaker is audible to everyone. We may remove you from the Zoom if you do not comply with this request. Refrain from taking pictures or videos of other participants. You may be held accountable for data privacy violations if you post such photos and videos without consent. For questions and inquiries, you may utilize the Zoom Q&A feature. Questions will be addressed after the presentation. Don't forget to evaluate. The link to the evaluation form will be posted in the chat box at the end of the webinar. It will be accessible for 10 minutes only. Digital certificates will only be given to those who have successfully registered, participated, and answered the evaluation form. Webinar.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for that. I hope you have noted on our webinar netiquette today. Now, before we start, I know everyone is already excited to learn more about literature review. We'll have our coordinator, Professor Nan Bernardes, to introduce to us our speaker.
Yes, thank you so much, Miss Jara. So beautiful, Professor Gumalao here, here in the office. So again, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today's event. Mr. Cian Policarpio is an accomplished scholar and also an educator in the field of natural sciences. He completed his bachelor's degree in biology at the University of the Philippines, Cebu, graduating as valedictorian and magna cum laude. He also earned his master's degree in environmental science from the same university, specializing in natural systems. During his time at UP Cebu, Sir Cian had the unique opportunity to participate in the corporate study program at Mokpo National Maritime University in South Korea, where he focused on ocean systems, environmental engineering, and also naval architecture. Currently, Sir Cian serves as the faculty member at University of the Philippines, Cebu, where he teaches subjects related to natural and physical sciences, statistics, and also in research. His diverse research interests include emergency education, computational biology, statistical modeling, environmental data science, molecular biotechnology, big data analytics, and also application of natural sciences to address social issues. I know that we're all excited to meet our speaker for this afternoon's event. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Cian L. Policarpio. A virtual round of applause, please.
Welcome to KUAN series, Sir Cian.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Miss Jera. Thank you, Sir Nance. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to our KUAN series for the ABCs of Literature Review. Sige, so let me share my screen. Okay, is my screen visible na ba?
Yes, po.
Okay, thank you very much, Hernan. So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our KUAN series with the title of ABCs of Literature Review. So for this session, we will be discussing how to actually prepare your research review, and then at the same time, I will be providing tips on how to improve what your existing literature na output. Okay? Sige. To start with, let's define first what is literature review, because I believe many people think na it will only equate to the RRL, which is a component of a thesis paper or research paper. However, it can also stand as an individual paper, such as a review article that we see on journals. Now, literature review is actually a process wherein we synthesize the results from a wide and complex set of studies. So, very important point for literature review is we synthesize the results. We do not only list what we've read, but actually provide a coherent argument or focused description about a topic. Now, in the process of synthesizing these results, um, you only provide a new perspective on a particular topic that you want to review. You do not generate new research out of this literature na review. Now, it's very important to have literature review, especially for budding, not only for budding researchers, but also to seasoned no, na mga researchers, because it helps readers and researchers alike to understand or make sense of the available information. So of course, as researchers, we have our reasons, no, our rationale why we conduct our study. However, we cannot fully explain the reason why we conduct our study if we were not able to make sense of the existing information about the topic. So in making sense of this available information, we focus on the recap of important information from several sources. And then we identify about key trends and gaps of a particular topic. And then at the same time, we reorganize information. Now, these three objectives are very important in literature review or in the research process. First and foremost, if we identify key trends and gaps, this will actually help you support your study. No, why conduct this research? So the presence of a research gap indicates that we have something to research on. At the same time, your literature review provides important information. So it will tell us what protocols are available for this particular topic and what has already been done about the topic. And in doing the literature review, once you reorganize the information, you actually create your own argument about a particular topic. But again, let me highlight this note. No, there should be no addition of new contribution to the ideas of others. Essentially, in a literature review, you synthesize only what is already being presented in journal articles or in the literature. You do not provide your own input or your own theory or your own hypothesis unless the literature evidence points to that direction. So you only provide, again, no, if we go back to the previous slide, we only provide a new perspective. Now, in the literature review, we are going to be exposed to many types of literature. First type, I believe, which is familiar to all of us here, is what we call as the primary literature. When you say primary literature, it actually shows us new and original findings. So it became primary because that is the first time the findings or the research is actually reported. So that's why it's called primary literature. And most of us use primary literature, especially kaning these journal articles we get from different research databases. Most of them are what we call as primary literature. Now, we also have what we call as the secondary literature. As I've mentioned earlier, when we say literature review, it's not only the RRL component of a thesis manuscript, but also a review article, which can be found in journal databases. So, review articles are classified under secondary literature. It's because primary literature has already been processed to create a new perspective and then it was published. So that's secondary literature. Aside from these two, we also have what we call as tertiary literature. So there are times na we use textbooks or let's say magazines, no, because they provide ideas or provide information that we want to use. Now textbooks and magazines and the likes are under the tertiary literature because this is already primary and secondary information combined and then summarized. Then the last type is what we call as our gray literature. Gray literature is a type of literature wherein information is not produced by commercial publishers. So that would include thesis, um, government reports, working papers. So even some would even say that newspapers or news articles are part of the gray literature. So it's because again these are information not produced by commercial publishers. Now, once we have a brief or a general idea of what a literature review is and what are the different types of literature that we can actually use, we can now proceed with how to write the actual review itself. First things first, we need to define our search question. In my experience, no, not only as a researcher but also as a teacher, my students keep on asking how can they get the articles that they need that they're going to use for their study. Some are even surprised. For my case, sir, how did you get this article? We can't even see this online. So if we try to trace back the process, it might be they have a problem in defining the search question. Because if you have the proper search question, you can skip irrelevant results and irrelevant studies. So how are we going to do that one? We need to use our research topic. Let's say, for example, now your research topic is still somewhat general. In this case, effect of pollution on marine vertebrates. That is a really broad na topic. We need to narrow it down. So we need to focus on a particular aspect. Let's say pollution. What kind of pollution are we talking about here? So in this scenario, I've highlighted microplastics. Or if you want heavy metal, na pollution or oil spill. So it's up to you on what aspect you want to highlight as long as it's related or it directly translates to your research topic. Then marine vertebrates, there are a lot of marine vertebrates. So what vertebrates or what organisms are we going to look into? In this case, I've presented fish. So if we have that too, we have these two aspects, let's say microplastic pollution on fishes. There are still a lot of literature that will appear in our database. So it's because microplastics have a lot of effect on fishes. So we need to further specify it such that it would point towards our study. So in this case, we can see growth rate, meaning out of all the possible effects, what we need to look into is the effect of microplastics on the growth rate of fishes. Now, this somewhat specifies the literature that's going to appear in your database once you're going to search. However, there are still irrelevant papers that might appear on this case. So how are we going to further refine our search question? We need to organize the parameters of the topic. So the challenge here in organizing the parameters is to make an outline on the aspects or parameters that you need. So if you go back to the previous slide, we want to look at the effect of microplastic pollution on fish growth rate. That is still broad. Now, what aspects are we going to look into for each part? So one example of organizing these parameters is making an outline. So this is an outline I made showing what aspects, for example, of microplastic pollution do I want to check. So of course, possible sources, the chemistry behind microplastics, and the possible fate of microplastics. So knowing these three, it could point into which organisms will be impacted with microplastics. So that would be fishes in the scenario. So I want growth rate. So which aspects do we want to know about growth rate? So life stage specific, or what factors the contribute to the effect of microplastic on growth rate. So we can organize that one into an outline. Now, in this scenario, I am showing to you a graphical outline. However, you can always do it on a list form if you're familiar, like Roman numeral 1, the first topic, let's say microplastics. Then capital A, sources. Then you want to specify the sources further, let's say small I, aquatic sources, something like that. So we can do those things. Now, based on experience, some of my students will say na, "Sir, we are not yet familiar with the topics or the aspects that we need to specify. So all we have are general terms." So my response to my students in that case is it's okay because this outline is not yet final. Because literature review is a dynamic process. As you continue reading and continue examining articles, you are going to see aspects that seems relevant to your topic. So you need to build it back into your outline. Okay? So that's how you refine. And then as a result, you will now refine your search question and improving the type of literature that you're going to receive. Now, let's say once you already have your general na, outline, what will happen next is we identify databases and other information sources. For the first part, as a general na practice no, by many people, we immediately go to Google or Google Scholar. However, if you already have prior experience on writing research paper, you already are familiar with some of the databases available. Now, for me, since I am on the natural na science na field, I use NCBI, the ones listed here, Biomed Central, PNAS, Science Direct Nature. Then, of course, for the social science, and I believe on the other fields as well, we also have the Taylor and Francis, JSTOR, Emerald, EBSCO, Springer, and then I believe there are also links circulating online about different local databases such as Philippine e-journals, Tuklas Lunas. We can actually go to that one. Before I proceed, may I ask lang Miss Paula Cernans, are we going to share a copy of this presentation to our viewers
Hi,
or not?
sir. Hi,
Yes,
Sir
miss.
Cian.
Yes, miss.
This presentation will be available via the UP Cebu TLRC YouTube channel.
Okay.
So if our viewers would like to review all of their learning, they can go directly to the YouTube channel and they can find this PowerPoint as well as all of the proceedings of this session.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Jera. So maybe we can also attach links, let's say for the local databases on the description so that our viewers can also check. No? So
Yes, Sir
yes,
Cian.
thank you very much.
I will make sure I put it in the chat box as well as for those watching in the YouTube. We currently have around
Okay.
300 in the YouTube as well.
Okay, thank you
Thank you,
very
sir.
much. Thank you. So yes, okay, so thank you very much. So these are just examples of databases. And then if you're also familiar with DOAJ, DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, it will provide us with a list of different journal databases that we can search. We also have, I think you're familiar with the ERIC. So these are the Hindawi, MPDI. These are good databases that we can actually search, or we can actually look for that articles or papers or literature that we need. Now, once we have these databases, there are still times na our search results are still not the things that we need to see. It might be, let's say, our topic, your search topic is still broad. You might find thousands of literature that will appear, or your topic is somewhat rare or novel. So you will see very limited number of literature. So we need to develop there a search strategy in order to address this problem. Now, there are two strategies that we can employ. First is what we call as the keyword approach. So we use related words found in initial literature results. So if you are familiar, or if you've noticed, diba, in a journal article, you will see the title and then the abstract and then the keywords. Now, you might notice the keywords are terms that are related to the study but are not immediately found in the title. The purpose of those keywords is that if you cannot, you can actually use those words to gain more literature that you can use for your study. So my practice together with my students when we make their paper, I always require them to have at least 3 to 5 keywords that are not found in the title of their study, such that when there are other researchers who want to reference their paper in looking for additional topics, they can actually see different types of literature using the keywords. Similarly, we can also use citation searching. I believe this is also familiar to many of us here, wherein we search for papers that cite the one you are reading, or search for papers cited by the one you are reading. So you might read the paper and you may notice, this statement is really, really relevant to my study. But this was cited by the article that you are actually reading. You can search for that article that your current article is citing, and then you can add it on your pool of literature. Okay, that's our strategies. So we can further improve the citation, searching, and keyword approach using several other techniques. So one of which is what we call as truncation. So truncation is a technique wherein we shorten a word and then add an asterisk so that we can get its different variations. So for example, let's say this one, pollute, Pollut asterisk. So what would happen here is that the literature that will appear would show words that start with Pollut. So that could be pollution, pollute, pollutes, polluted. So these are we can use that one in order to widen our available na literature for use. Some also use wildcards, which are spelling variants for a word. Now, for wildcards, you might notice there are articles written in US English or articles written in British or UK English. So if you only type a word if you type a particular word and it has a spelling variant, the spelling variant will usually not appear. So let's say, for example, color. For US English, color without U, but color in UK English has U. So in order to cater words, the word color, whether with U or without U, place a question mark. Or synthesize, that would be a Z or an S. So use a question mark. For this case, the first word, that could be woman or women. So we can also use wildcards for that one. Aside from wildcards, we also have what we call as quotation marks. So in this case, you really need the exact term to appear. So in this case, if you use the term ocean pollution without the quotation mark, articles involving the ocean or involving pollution will appear. It's not necessarily ocean pollution. So to ensure that the word ocean pollution appears, you can add quotation marks, or you can use Boolean operators like and, or not. So for example, microplastic fate, not ingestion, meaning all articles that will appear there talks about the fate or what will happen to your microplastics, except for those that involve ingesting or being eaten. Okay, that's not. Or if you use and, microplastic fate and ingestion, that will show you all the fates, the fate of the all articles about the fate of microplastics as being ingested. If we use microplastic fate or ingestion, the or there will search for articles either containing the term microplastic fate or ingestion. Not necessarily it's the microplastic that's being ingested in that case. Okay, so these are Boolean operators. Now, let's say you have one particular paper that you're really interested in, and you're having a hard time looking for other studies that are similar to that paper. We can actually use this particular website. Let me introduce to you connectedpapers.com. Connectedpapers.com is I use this one as well. This is a very interesting website because all you need to do is you can provide your keywords here, or let's say you already found one paper or the DOI of that paper, you just place it here on this search bar and then click build a graph. What will happen in connectedpapers.com is that it will search all the articles that cite that paper that you are using, or all the articles cited by that paper, and it will generate a graph similar to this one, the image on the side, circle with different with different lines, wherein the darkness of the circle and the line would indicate how many times the paper was actually cited, or how many times, or how relevant or how close the papers are to each other. In this scenario, if it's a dark circle, that would mean this paper is closely related to the first paper you searched, and so on. So in this case, this is actually a relatively, quote unquote, quicker way to look for literature. But as my practice, no, together with my students, yes, I will allow them to use connected papers, pero they need to go through first with the first part, like providing me with a proper search question, then creating an initial outline. So they need to do those first before I allow them to use connected papers, because this will actually shorten the time that they need to look into studies, and then they don't need to look to each of the databases one by one. So the papers that will be cited here in connected papers, you don't have to worry, because I believe most of them have DOI and are primary articles. Now, what we're going to do na lang as researchers is to identify if the article there is indeed relevant for your study, or is it not questionable, the quality is good. So that's our task na if we use connected papers, because connected papers just tries to look for articles on a basic sense, like citations, similarity in terms, but quality wise it's not that perfect yet. So the human input in reviewing the articles must be there. Okay? Now, once you have your articles, sige, before we proceed to that one, now let's say even with the connected papers and all those techniques, you still receive too few results. So you can use, these are recommended strategies, so you can use alternative keywords. So um, let's say you want to study about cats. So instead of writing cats, write felines, something like that. Or use or as a Boolean operator, or provide truncation in order to cater for spelling differences. Then make sure that your data coverage is somewhat broad or somewhat updated in order to provide additional results. Now, what if there are too many results? Now, the strategy here is to narrow it down. So use end or you apply limits. So I believe many of us practice, no, especially on fields wherein literature keeps on being published. We apply the date limit. So for example, in UP High School, I request my students to use at least 10 years from our discussion. Let's say 2024, 10 years, so that's 2014 to 2024. However, that rule is not absolute because there are theories, okay, there are theories that are way older than 2014 and it is still relevant or it's still the same as of today. So in that case, I will allow them to use those theories, especially for theories, but for protocols, for results, if there are a lot of literature available, I set the time frame as 10 years. Or if you want, limit the language because in a lot of literature available, some are even written in Spanish, in French, in Korean. So maybe we can limit it on a language that we can understand. So more or less it's English. Okay? Or what if you already have your optimal number of literature? There are there is a checklist here. Is it enough? So have you covered everything? If it's a review article, there is no specific set of number of articles that you need to cover to ensure that you call it as an article review. But as a rule of thumb, for many researchers and many editors, that would be at least 70 to 100 articles. Now for RRL, that I believe that's too many to work on. So for example, for my class, I ask them to start with at least 50. And then they're trying to weed out articles there that are not that relevant or they try to add more. So that's how we assess if is it enough. Then have you covered everything? So you need to go back to your outline and check if each of the aspects in the outline already has an equivalent na literature. Now, once you feel that it's enough, or once you assess that's already enough, you skim read the abstracts and save the results. Now, the next problem in literature review is how are you going to read a lot of articles on a particular span of time? Now, my technique, I use the technique promoted by Kishav in 2010. The technique there is read the title, read the abstract, and then read each subheading. So you do not necessarily read the content, just the abstract, the title, and all of the subheadings. That's the first round of reading. After that first round, you need to answer the following questions. First, what is the context of the study? By just reading the abstract and the subheadings, you should be able to see the context of the study. Next, you also need to determine what are the contributions of the study. So context, contribution. Okay, so by reading the subheadings, you will see the major contributions because these subheadings should show major findings. And then clarity. Is the paper easy to understand? Now, if you're able to address these three, you can actually include them in your study. Or based on what you've read, you might notice, this aspect is really interesting. It was presented in this paper, but not on other papers. I believe this is relevant for my study. You can add that keyword into your outline and then do the literature search again. So if you notice, it is not a linear process, but rather literature review is a dynamic process that keeps on developing as you proceed forward. Now, after having your literature, it's time to write the paper itself. So we need to synthesize the information obtained from the sources. Now, after reading, you need to develop the matrix of information. So this is my suggested matrix of information. From the outline that we made earlier, we need to transform it into this table. Now, you have the reference, major findings, theories and methodologies, and then research gap. There are different other ways. There are other ways in making the literature matrix, but as a researcher, I prefer this type. Why? Because it highlights the important things that you need to look at in a literature, which are the results of the study, which you can use for arguments or discussion, especially on the later part of the paper. You will see theories and methodologies, so you can use them as references in order to implement a particular study. And then research gap that would tell you what is missing in the study, which would further strengthen your need to perform a study. Now, among these, research gap must be written in your own words. That would determine, or that would test that you indeed understood the article that you were reading. So that would answer what still needs to be done or what can be done for the study. Now we should make a logical analysis for this section because I have the student before. We were actually examining the study of my student is examining dog care among different socioeconomic classes. So of course, you have articles. The student of mine has different articles. Then when I checked his research gap, one of the research gaps he've written, this article is interesting, but it does not talk about dogs or dog care. So why include that one in your literature review if it doesn't even talk about the study that you have? Diba? So remove. So you need to do a logical analysis in making the research gap. I think as researchers, while reading the paper, you might ask, why did they not do this particular process? Or why did they not include this? So mga limitations. So that could spring towards making the research gap. Now, aside from that one, another important thing in the literature matrix or a literature table is providing the figures, the tables, and the page number of those figures and tables. That would tell you later on, so once you reference them back, you will know which page are you looking for. You don't need to go back to the entire paper again. And then, if you want to highlight the results in order to limit cases of plagiarism, write the results in your own understanding or in your own words, unless a quotation is necessary. And then here on the references, you not only need to write the title, but you need to cite it based on the citation style that you're going to use. So for most APA 7 is actually used, so you need to write it in an APA 7 form. If you have a referencing software, that's also allowed. Now, let's say you've finished your entire literature matrix. You need to go to the proper writing. Now, there are different ways in writing a literature. Now, for many, especially for my students, their typical practice is just present them according to the different variables of the study. Yes, that's somewhat an okay or an acceptable practice, especially for starting researchers. But in order for us to further provide quality in our RRL or in our literature review, we need to frame this literature into one of the following approaches. First is state of the art. Let's say your study focuses on using a particular method to improve a particular, let's say, event or pinaka-common sa education, using something to improve academic performance, something like that. The best approach in writing your literature in that case is the state of the art. You provide the most current research on a given topic. Of course, you are in your study, if let's say using short form content in teaching a particular topic in the social sciences, say, let's say you were using that topic. So you need to look into literature, or you need to present what are the current findings on the use of the short form content. And then you point out what's an issue on using that one, or what is missing. So this is actually the most commonly used, no, for many researchers. That state of the art. You're presenting what's the current understanding and what's missing. It's essentially the basic RRL. However, there are times na we need to change or reframe the understanding. So we use comparison of perspectives. Let's say an issue on online classrooms. So there are studies that will tell you it's beneficial. There are studies that will tell you that it's not. So your task as a researcher, if your study is involving that one, you can actually do comparison of perspective. Provide the different aspects that make online classes beneficial, provide the different aspects that make online classes disadvantageous. And as a researcher, based on what are those arguments are, provide a perspective. Provide the perspective na based on what we do, what the literature is telling us, we can say that only online classes are advantageous if the students are like this, or but they become disadvantageous when. Okay. So you do not contribute a new idea, but you provide a new perspective. Okay. Then synthesis of two fields. Let's say you want to study about traditional medicine. Okay, traditional medicine. You want to provide an understanding of traditional medicine in an anthropological perspective and on the medical perspective, and you fuse the two. That is a synthesis of two fields. So you can do that one in making your literature. Or this is for highly advanced, no, for review articles, theoretical model building. So your intention is to develop new theories. So I believe this is mostly on mga seasoned na researchers for starting, or just like us, no, na we're still understanding or grasping the research process. I think we will not, let's not do this yet. Okay. Then of course, we have historical na literature review. So for this case, if you want to focus, this is more common on technology, wherein you want to explain how the technology developed over time and how was it improved. So you can use a historical approach, and then your study would then point out, however, the current technology can further be improved, hence your study. Okay, that's the historical na literature review. Now, here is the problem in many researchers, not only budding researchers, but even mga seasoned ones. Some have the tendency to do a laundry list or shopping list literature review. What does it mean? You keep on providing results and results and results and results. Walang synthesis. So, parang laundry list or shopping list, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, I want to buy this. Parang ganun lang. So, that is not advisable, no? That is not advisable when making your literature review, because what will happen is that the writing becomes very difficult to understand, and the focus shifts on listing the different results. Eh, what if pareho lang pala yung point ng lahat ng results na yun? You can compress that one into one or two sentences. And then, you're highlighting the result. No, you're not highlighting the different studies. Now, very important in literature review, focus on the findings or the idea, not who did it. Not unless, okay, clarify natin, not unless the person who did that study is made a major contribution in that field. Um, let's say sino ba? Si Miss Jera Gumala, let's say Gumalal 2022. can mention Miss Jera we can mention Miss Jera in the article if the article that you're citing from her made a major, let's say, methodological advancement. So we can highlight first who did the first method and then discuss ka na sa findings using that method. Okay, so again, let's be careful in not doing a shopping list literature review. As teachers and as educators, I believe maraming gumagawa na students nito. So you need to teach them not to do this. Because in the end, what will happen if we allow a laundry list or a shopping list literature review? Once you go to the results and discussion, they're not going to look back into their RRL. What does your RRL tell you? Bakit ganito yung findings mo? They will not look at back. They will not look back in your RRL. They will search again and try to help them explain why their findings are that one. That's why we need to avoid a laundry list. Okay. Now, once let's say you have already a draft of your RRL, the next thing you do is evaluate if the paper is readable or interesting. Double check if the paper is written concisely while maintaining substantial detail. Is it easy to understand with minimal hedging? What do I mean by hedging? Those terms like this might or this can. Now, this mga unsure na mga terms, these are what we call as hedging terms. It's better na wala sila because if you provide hedging terms, readers might say, why is this author unsure of what he or she is saying? No? Then provide a forceful presentation with clear statement of theory. So if you have a lot of articles that you've read, boil it down to its essence and provide a clear statement of what they already said, what are they talking about. Then emphasis again on author's activities and results. Now, as a practice or as a bit of an extension, these are the things that you need to actually take note of. First is careless extension of language rules. So, marami to, especially on the natural sciences, na the term is a noun, but they convert it into a verb. Let's say, the beans were ground and the grind date was chilled. Now, this term, grind date, this is a noun, but it doesn't actually exist. No, ginawa mo lang yung term na grind date kasi galing sa ground. So that's a careless extension. Or the residents were questionnared. A questionnaire is a noun and then you transformed it into a verb. So we need to be careful about these things. We also have spoken fads, noun or adjective changed to verb with IZE. So there are terms that let's say idolize. Idolize is a word in the English language. But there are other terms, pinaka-controversial na gumagamit ito, utilize. Utilize. An argument by one of leading researchers, no? Just use the term use. Use and utilize mean the same thing. Why extend it by adding the IZE daw? Though some some researchers will argue that the term use and the term utilize have different ways of using them. No? Pero yes, that one. Next, nouns added with wise. So mga let's say for example, likewise, though likewise is an acceptable term in an English language, but in research, many editors really don't want to use the term likewise because it provides a general na grouping on a particular aspect you're talking. Tapos sabihin mo likewise, parang na-generalize, parang may hasty generalization. Or itong faces with experience tacked on the end. So yung mga nagsasabing, this is a learning experience. What is happening to you? Are you learning or are you experiencing? Then acronyms, abbreviations. Then this one, acceptable words, meaning they exist in the English language, but are erroneous. The feline developed a vascular tumor. Feline pertains to all cat groups, domestic cats, lions, tigers. When you say feline here, what are you studying? Are you studying the entire feline group or are you pertaining, let's say, to a domestic cat? Diba? So you need to be careful. Or the anthropology of Greeks in Athens. The term anthropology, diba? Anthropology is is a study, it's a field. So the anthropology of Greeks, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the entire study of the Greeks or you're talking about the day-to-day life of the Greeks? So you need to be careful. Or the substance was reacted with acetic acid. Now this is more of an issue of the voice. So this should be the acetic acid reacted with the substance. Okay. Then words with drop portions, so prep for prepared, vet for veterinarian, sched for schedule. We also need to be careful about those. We need to assume that our readers do not know the shortened form of the word, regardless of how common they appear. So you need to provide the actual term. Then these devil pairs, they have different meanings, but sometimes we tend to interchange them. So let's say accuracy and precision. Tapos ito, gender and sex. So maraming nag-argue niyan. Vaccinate, immunize. These are somewhat similar but they provide different meaning. Imply, infer, infect, infest, diba? So we need to be careful about what words are we going to use. Then, of course, sensitive language. Use a gender-neutral term when speaking generically, and then replace a third person singular possessive noun with article. So although I've noticing some papers that are already using third person singular possessive nouns, but it would be better no to because that if you use a third person singular possessive noun, you are actually may not be using a gender neutral term. So to avoid those cases, we need to use articles instead. Okay? Ito, vague qualifiers and nouns, we need to limit them. So when you say fairly or fairly regular, what do I mean by fairly regular? This is a vague qualifier. So we need to be careful about that one. Or tong very active. What's the difference between an active or very active? Maybe you can say more active or as much active as. So we need to be careful. We also need to be careful about vague nouns. So let's say process, problem, character. The character of the study. What character are we talking about? Are we talking about character as in mabait o hindi mabait? Character as in a person? Or character as in, let's say, an animal? Character as in a symbol? Ganon. So we need to be careful because these are vague nouns as well. We also have these. Ito yung pinaka-favorite ko, lazy verbs. So you avoid the use of lazy verbs, especially if you partner them with inanimate objects. Ito common mistake na nakikita ko. The table shows. The term show indicates that the one doing it is actually animate. It can move because it's showing. Your table, let's say table 1, is inanimate. So it's highly discouraged, no, because some are still accepting this. It's highly discouraged to use that one. Later on, I will present to you how to write it instead. Ito, be careful with empty fillers. Like, there are students just to reach the word limit. Bibigyan ka ng mataas na phrase, merong shortened form niya, no? It would thus appear that. Yung pala, apparently lang yung ibig sabihin. O, it is this, that. Yun, this lang pala. Or repetitions, 1 a.m. in the morning. AM na nga, in the morning pa. Or collaborate together. If you collaborate, meaning you're working together. So remove the word together na. Ganon. Okay? Then, of course, some other overlooked rules in the English language, which is sentence voice, ambiguous pronouns, incomplete comparisons, grammar of list. we need to be careful about these as well because this may point out to longer sentences na medyo confusing pa yung terms, no? So one example, favorite ko to. The researcher tested the mice observing this schedule. Who is observing the schedule? Is it the mice or the researcher? Because misplaced yung modifier. Or ito, following a fat meal, the animal collapsed. Are you telling me that the animal is actually walking behind a fat meal? Or did the animal eat a fat meal and then collapse? Okay, so we need to be careful of those. Or no mosquitoes were found using the standard bait trap. So were you catching mosquitoes using standard bait traps or you were looking for mosquitoes who know how to use standard bait traps? Ganon. So we need to be careful on the way we write our literature. For example, ito. According to this interpretation, it is then concluded by the authors of this present study that 10,500 tons of lead that are in addition to the 90,000 tons which are presently being emitted will be emitted into the atmospheric envelope during the course of the next calendar year. Ang haba. We can actually shorten that one. Based on the interpretation, about 100,500 tons of lead will be emitted in the atmosphere next year. Diba? From 6 lines, we shortened it into 2. No? So yun yung point ni literature review. Be direct to the point. Huwag mo nang paikot-ikutin. Ito, another one. As figure 1 shows, figure 1 shows, lazy verb. Bioaccumulation was seen to occur in 12 species of plants exposed to 100 ppm zinc. Ito. Bioaccumulation occurred in 12 plant species exposed to 100 ppm zinc. Figure 1. Wala na yung shows. So pag nakita ni researcher na may parenthesis figure 1, he or she will know that he or she needs to look at figure 1. Ganon. Results showed protection by the vaccine, but degeneration of cells occurred. So results showed. How do we improve that? The vaccine protected the patients, but degenerated their cells. So may student ako before nang ginawa niya, the vaccine protected the patients, but their cells degenerated. So nauna yung their cells. So naging dangling modifier siya or hanging modifier, misplaced modifier. So sino yung tinuturo niyo na there? Yung patients or yung vaccine? However, if you try to write it this way, makikita mo na we've conserved the vaccine protected, the vaccine degenerated. So alam mo na si there that talks about the patients. Yun. Once you're done, review your citation. So most institutions actually use APA 7. So it's very important that we have proper citation because this ensures intellectual integrity by giving credit to the proper sources. So just a quick view, especially if you use APA 7. APA 7 uses the author date citation system. So examples, if you have a parenthetical citation, you place it at the end. For example, Smith 2021, close in a parenthesis. Or let's say Smith 2021 pero meron ka pang mga EG, may mga additional. You can do that one, separate it with a semicolon. Or if you want to place it at the start, Smith parenthesis 2021. This one, the first part, this is very rare because this might lead to laundry listing. So most of the time, we use the first two. Now, meron tayong cases na mababantayan yun yung students natin. Mahilig isang paragraph, isang source lang. Hindi na yan literature review. But let's say you need to devote a paragraph just for one source because that source provides a very detailed thing about your study. What you're going to do is introduce the author with the full in-text citation at the beginning of the paragraph and at the end. So by introducing the name of the author in full text citation first, you might say, baka laundry listing yan. No. Kasi di ba sabi ko, if you highlight a single paragraph for a single source, that would mean that study is very important for your paper. So we should introduce whose study are we talking about then? So that's Spitz. In this case, it's Spitzer. So makikita niyo, as you read the example, Spitzer developed the guideline. So very important talaga yung study niya. And then to end it, dapat i-cite mo ulit, Spitzer 2010. Hindi yung one paragraph, isang citation lang nasa end. Hindi ganun. So here are other rules in APA. So if one author, two authors, three or more. So I think we are already familiar with this. Ang very important lang dito is if the author is an institution, provide its complete name first before providing the acronym. Yeah. This is in text. And then yung end reference mo, follow lang the basic format of the institution. For APA 7, ganito, author, parenthesis date, close, title, and then source. So basic na template lang. Now, reminders and citing references kasi there are times na you might be confused on who to cite or not. Check all entries in the in-text and end references. Kung sino yung naka-in-text, dapat nasa end reference din. Then, any statement of fact that is not common knowledge must be cited appropriately. How do we know if it's not common knowledge? Ask these two questions. Did I know this information before reading the paper? Did this information or idea came from my own brain? So you need to be careful. If you do not know the information beforehand, then you need to cite it. Or if it's not your own idea, you need to cite it. Then double check your work to make sure you have not plagiarized. So we have a lot of plagiarism checkers right now that would help you improve your writing. Then aside from that one, cite sources if you place direct codes or yung mga mahilig mag-paraphrase, you change the words by turning it into a synonym. So ganon. Then you also need to cite if the sentence is mostly made of your own thoughts, yes, galing talaga sa'yo, pero mayroon kang kinuha na idea from the author. So that would not become fully yours. You need to cite it as well. You also need to cite, if you mention the name of the author, ideas, data, photos, equations. If these are not yours, you need to cite them. Then additional tips, use referencing softwares. And then, I know na medyo detailed na yung pagkakasulat nyo. Make sure that the audience will not lose interest kasi there are articles na ayoko nang basahin kasi it's too complicated, it's too technical for me. Review lang nga yung ginagawa natin. So keep a balance between providing a comprehensive discussion but make sure that you still keep the attention of your reading audience. Then be critical, consistent, and logical. Now, sa dami-dami ng sinabi ko, always remember this. You cannot cram the RRL. I always say this to my students. I usually give them a month to write. Meron pang gumagawa a week before. You cannot do that one because the quality will never be the same. Okay? So, I think that ends my presentation. If you want to learn more about writing literature review, I have these references that you can go through as well. So thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sir Cian. Thank you so much for that very clear and very much outlined, no? I hope everyone was able to catch up to it. And I myself has a lot of things that I was able to learn. Thank you so much for that, Sir Cian. But for now, I will let you rest. Because that was quite a long, not quite a long lecture, but of course, the mental energy that you have to use for that. Let's just say, let's have him rest for about 5 minutes. And before we directly go to our question and answer, let me know where you come from. I already found that some came from the Davao Oriental State University. Hi there to our audiences from Davao. Thank you so much for being with us. Another afternoon with TLRC. And thank you so much for those covering. Okay, thank you so much for those who are watching from Pampanga State Agricultural University. Thank you so much. From those coming from Nueva Ecija, from Caloocan, from Bulacan, thank you so much. From Bicol, hi! Bukidnon State University, and also from Manila. Oh, meron tayo. Miss Paula told me that we have some audiences coming from Italy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Also from Thailand, thank you. Thank you for having us with you this afternoon of learning. From Naga City, from Baguio City, Cagayan de Oro City, thank you so much for being with us. We're so many right now. We're coming from different parts of the Philippines. From Rizal Technological University at Pasig, thank you so much. St. Paul College of Parañaque, thank you so much. From Tayabas Western Academy, from Santo Tomas, Batangas, Cavite State University, Emilio Aguinaldo College, Manila, from Lipa, Batangas, Marinduque. That's new. We have an audience coming from Marinduque today. From Catanduanes, Bohol, from St. Clair, Mindanao State University, from Samar, again from Laguna, hi, I miss Laguna so much, from Legazpi, Albay, and Iloilo, as well as Negros Occidental. Thank you so much for being with us. From Zamboanga City, hi, I will be going back to Zamboanga del Norte tonight. Okay. And we also have viewers from the Philippine Army. Thank you so much for being with us. I do hope this is very interesting as well as helpful for everyone who attended us today. Okay, now there are things that I was able to learn from Sir Cian's lecture, and I am very happy to share with you all of these. One is that you need to understand what RRL stands and what RRL's role, no, in our research writing process, and knowing where to find your resources based on your field or your topic. As for me and Sir Cian, we're coming from sciences, and that's the reason why most of our databases are coming from the sciences field as well. Also, learning how to create a matrix for the information you gathered. And this is one of the most important parts in making the RRL. Understanding and making a matrix of the information is important for you to deliberately curate and to properly and clearly write your RRL. Also, learning how to approach your research writing, as well as avoiding things that might confuse your audience or readers of your RRL when writing, no? Also, note the readability and clarity of your RRL, as well as be careful with spoken fads and jargon bombing, as well as citing your resources properly. And the best thing that Sir Cian actually said that needs to be reminded of, no, sa mga students natin. Our students always do this at some point. Please don't cram on your RRL. RRL is both a journey and a process of writing. And I also believe that doing RRL ahead of time, no, before doing your methodologies is highly important, because understanding what you have read in making your RRL also gives you an idea on how to approach your methodologies and how to approach your conduct of the study. And I do hope a lot of you are able to learn more about RRL writing, as well as determining where to what to avoid and where to get your resources and information today. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them by clicking on the Q&A box. Kindly use the Q&A box for this. And as for those watching at the YouTube channel, you may put them in the chat box. We have our technical assistant, Miss Paula, reading all of your questions over there and sending it out to us here in our Zoom meeting. Now, may I ask again, Sir Cian, are you ready?
Yes, sure, Miss J. Ready.
Okay, so ready, so ready. Now we are we are currently waiting for questions for the question and answer portion. And Sir Cian, please note if you have read in our comment section, a lot of our audience are already thanking you for a very well delivered lecture on RR. Okay. Any questions, my dear audience? Our participants, do you have any questions? Kindly put them in our Q&A box. Sir Sian, may I ask, do you also agree when we say that our our RRL is also one way of arguing, no? The importance of the research that we are doing. What do you think about that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Miss J. Yes, I agree no na RRL is one way of arguing because in writing your RRLs you've mentioned earlier, you will provide a new perspective and that perspective could be your argument on why you need to conduct your study or why you need to use this method in order to implement your study or why you use these variables. So yes, very very important si RRL kasi multipurpose siya, no?
Oo.
So yes, yun. Thank you, Miss J.
Thank you for that. Also, Sir Sian, I think it is also right to really read a lot before doing the RRL and understanding where your perspective comes from. This is very important also, di ba, sir? When you are doing your methods or your methodology in research or in the conduct of your research, because you will be looking at the various methods that other researchers were able to do. Either you will be doing an innovation out of their methods or you will be replicating their methods to check or validate some data. So I think doing and reading information and articles before creating your RRL and doing your RRL the best way you can also improves your understanding of your own study. Okay,
Yes.
uh there is already one question. Are you willing to answer this one, Sir Gian?
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing the question. So if I may read the question, do you have any recommended citation generators for thesis writing po? Okay. There are a lot of citation generators. So if medyo old school ka pa, Microsoft Word has its own citation
Yes.
generator. So I used that one before. Tapos sa case ko ngayon, there is Zotero, there is Mendeley, yes, pero I I prefer Zotero kasi mas I can organize my literature further instead of doing let's say the matrix on a paper. I can actually do it in Zotero. Then I can just click and drag the articles, group them together, so mas mabilis. At the same time, very interactive, very ipopromote ko na lang si Zotero. Very friendly kasi you space the DOI, siya na maghahanap ng ibang details like the author, the year, the title, lala ka ng problema. So
Exactly. I
yes,
am using Zotero as well.
yes, so yan, I would recommend, yes, Zotero if you want.
Okay, there's another question here, sir. This is coming from
Mm-hmm.
our YouTube channel. Sir, can you please give us tips on how to publish a literature review paper?
Ah.
And how can we construct our SOPs?
Okay. Now, in publishing literature review, medyo may challenge yan kasi we have a matrix niyan eh. So you need to look at the number of papers present and then the coverage of these papers present on a particular topic. Now, if the coverage is very wide, and there are a lot of papers already, that's the time when we usually make a literature review. And that would be the time maganda na siya na mag-publish ka for a review paper. However, if there are a lot of papers, so parang na-imagine yung matrix, yung a lot of papers, pero maliit yung coverage, there is a way to make a literature review but people will tend to look what's a new study, increase the coverage, hindi lang yung we're focusing on the same aspect of a topic, or there are less papers, less coverage, or less papers, more coverage, yung dalawang nasa baba, mas maganda if primary studies yung gagawin niya.
Oo.
Yes.
Primary studies nga.
So I think yun yung magandang strategy if we want to publish a literature na review. Tapos if you're up to the challenge, hindi ko nilagay sa slide ko, you might want to do a systematic review. Parang higher type of review siya kasi
Oo.
parang may mga statistical, mathematical components na on how to
Mm.
measure yung mga iba't ibang R, yung mga relationship ng mga papers, gano'n. Kasi the challenge in literature review, for example, one study will say there's a significant relationship, the other study will also say significant, but their methods are different.
That's
So,
true.
so sa systematic review, you can actually level them off. So that's a good way also to publish a review article. Yun. Thank you.
Okay, so please remember you can, depending on how wide the scope is, and also you can do systematic review if you can. This is a more complex but also more data-driven way of doing literature review. Okay, next question. Can I cite articles that use different methods and participants compared to the ones that I have used?
Okay. You can actually cite them, pero do not stop lang on citing them. Kasi di ba you provide a perspective. You will say, there are studies that use this, pero iba yung gagamitin ko. Bakit iba yung gagamitin? So you need to, so di ba the first question of Miss Jera is provide an argument. So to provide an argument na why you will be using a different one, you need another set of literature there to support your argument. So yes, you can do that one, pero dapat evidence-based, evidence-backed yung mga gagawin mo. So yun.
So your RRL also provides you a chance to argue why you'll be doing this. It can be an argument on innovation, it can be argument on the specificity of your research, and you are technically doing a method that is almost similar to the ones being published already before. So it's a good way to argue and to propose a new way of looking at things. So kung validation ba, verification, ganun ang gagawin mo sa research. Okay, another question. Let's have another question. How do we know if there is very low number of related studies and literature for a particular study? Most of my students always state that they have made all ways to find RRL but only have a few.
Okay. So, dito lalabas yung diskarte mo as a researcher. So, one way, so if we can actually use yung pernisan ko kanina si connected papers, because connected papers can go through different databases. So, makikita mo gaano talaga karami. Another thing is once you try to search, if you go back to my slide, yung may flow chart na kung ano yung gagawin. So, if your student tells you na konti lang, they can actually review if baka yung pag-search nila may limit na sa year, hindi na lumalabas kasi puro luma na pala, ganun. Pero most of the time in information age, when you search, madami talagang lalabas. Na it's up to you how to filter which are quality papers, which are relevant papers. So nasa sige, personal na diskarte ko niyan, doon ako, kumakapit ako kay connected papers. Kung marami na yung branch ni connected papers, that means there's a lot. Pero you might have a different strategy that could also work. Thank you.
Okay. I also had that kind of how do you call that, experience, Sir Sian? Because when I was studying on science, language, and MTB, MLE, we really had a very few number of researchers focusing on science, jargons, and language for the mother tongue-based education. And the argument there was that some of these science jargons cannot be readily translated to the mother tongue. So that's one of the many causes that the MTB MLE has a difficulty in transitioning from one grade level to another, which now constitutes science subjects. So what I did also is I look at the various components of the problem and determine the possible and valid and possible researches that would explain that and validate that using other articles that are in the frame of the MTBM. So there are times that really have to go through very few information to be able to gain new information, especially for foundational knowledge researches that starts with nothing, that starts with very few information at hand. So it's okay to have few information, but you need to know how to frame your RRL to understand more about the topic that you are doing. Okay, next, let's have the next question.
Miss J,
Now,
can we address this question yung nasa chat? Parang maganda eh. Yung,
oo.
how do you cite studies initially included during the first semester,
Mm.
then on the second semester, the
Has
paper
been
was
retracted.
retracted? Yeah,
Oo.
very interesting. Sa Zotero, if the paper is retracted, it will flag you. Now you do not use it anymore. And I actually agree because the purpose of retraction is there might be something wrong
Mm.
on the study itself. It may be an implementation, it may be an analysis, no? That's why the paper was retracted. So most likely, I would suggest you do not cite it anymore. Kasi
Mm.
baka you will be feeding on more problematic studies in the future na if you continue on citing it, no? Kasi if the paper is good, may konti lang, parang may konting argument lang, what happens is in an article, there will be a communication paper. So if that's
Mm.
the case, the article is still good for citing. Pero kung retraction na, you don't use it anymore.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what I also think. That is also what I'm thinking when I saw this question. The only way to do is to take it out of your RRL or from your study when this particular research has been retracted already.
Yes.
It does not signify that the information is wrong, but it has to be taken because the information might be changed.
Yes.
So it might be not the same information that you have already included in your article. So it's best to take it out. Okay. So let's have another question from the Q&A. Let's have this question. What is the best way to structure RRL for a mixed method research design? Should the flow be inductive or deductive?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jet. So actually the first thing is it would depend on the study, no? Kasi you can implement a mixed method research design on many types of and many studies. Now, let's say kung yung mixed method study mo started from an observation, I think it would be better na you focus on an inductive na approach. Para yung readers mo makakaintindi bakit gumawa ka nito na study because you have observed something. Pero if your study is, let's say, grounded on a particular na theory, you do the other one. So hindi ka na magi-inductive, rather you will do the deductive one. That's my stand on that case because there is actually I have a student of mine last year who did a mixed methods research, and the study was based on an observation rather on a particular theory. So instead of doing a deductive one, we started with inductive. So parang specific, we're going to a general one. Yes. That's it.
Okay, so that's Sir Cian's stand on doing the RRL for mixed methods. Okay, now let's have another question. Let's have this question. Is it all right to cite in my thesis most of the articles used in other theses? Or is it okay to use thesis articles for your
Yun.
own?
Sige. Let's address first yung citing articles used by other thesis. So if these articles are published, of course, na-mention natin yung strategy na citation searching. So pwede yon. Pero if you cite a thesis and it's not yet published, medyo may question mark pa yon because that's under gray literature pa. So, yes, it underwent a certain level of scrutiny with your panel, pero hindi pa siya dumaan dun sa similar sa journal na ilang rounds na madugong review na mas intense pa na scrutiny. So, you can use those, pero you need to provide the disclaimer. Meron kasi yung way of citing a thesis eh. So
Mm.
that your panel or your researchers would, your reviewers would say nga, this is still a thesis. Hindi pa
Mm.
to ready. Hindi pa to yung katulad ng mga commercially published primary literature.
Mm.
Kasi may difference yung quality nun eh.
Mm.
What will happen is, yes, sa thesis mo, ang ganda-ganda na. Pagdating sa publication yan, ang daming papascrap, ganon. Because it
Mm.
will undergo further intense scrutiny. So yes, that's the case.
It is okay to use
Yes.
unpublished theses or school published theses first, especially if you're doing school theses as well.
Mm-mm. Yes,
However,
yes.
you need to look for the validated or verified published articles of the same concept as those theses when you want to publish it specifically for
Yeah.
journals, for
Yeah.
peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah, that's
That's
actually true.
mm,
Hindi naman sa pinipigilan natin because we also do that one with our students. Pero when
mm,
it comes to going to publication, para kasing hindi naman natin challenge yung quality ni thesis, pero there
mm,
is a certain stereotype or a certain notion if the paper is not yet published, then you're going to cite it. Ganun.
mm. But
Yes.
we are not limiting you because looking at the theses of other students who did their defense already and has completed their research writing already is also a good way to find a better outlook on your study and to understand what topics you wanted to pursue later on. And that's the good thing about reading other theses from other students. Okay. This question, sir, would you like to answer? As an expert on research, is there any law that punishes researchers who are fond of copying and pasting research articles without citing the primary source?
Hindi siya purely on research pero this is under the intellectual property na
Yes.
law.
Yes.
So it's the intellectual property law who will, yun yung panghahawakan nyo in order to ensure that primary literature studies are na copy paste, mahahanap niyo yung sinyong salarin or yung a way of protecting, no? Way of protecting researchers from having their studies being copy pasted. Kasi meron ka namang mga plagiarism checker. Of course, makikita yan kung copy pasted, reflect lang yun, oy, this is plagiarized by this, blah blah blah. You can
Mm.
go after that one following the intellectual property na law. Yan po.
Okay, so you got it there. So intellectual property law has it covered. Okay, for this next question, I think this has already been partially answered, no?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on including gray literature such as reports, theses, conference papers, and how do we ensure it adds value without compromising the quality of the URL? I think it has been partially answered already. It's okay. Diba,
Yes.
Sir Sian? It's
Yes.
okay.
I
But
also use gray literature especially if mahirap maghanap ng yung konti lang yung primary because for example, as I've mentioned earlier, news reports are considered to be gray literature. So that could provide you as with a certain argument. Pero don't forget, yung sinabi ni Miss Jera kanina, you also need to have a verified source as well. Let's say yung mga published articles that would further support this type of literature.
I also found, Sir Sian, that gray literature such as news reports is a good not benchmark but springboard to an
Yes.
argument.
Yes,
So
that is actually true.
you can use it as a springboard role in your RL rather than a verification role. It cannot be used to verify, but it can be used to be as a springboard to start your argument in the article.
Yes. Thank you, Miss
Okay.
Vera.
This last question, for masteral studies or even undergraduate studies, is it proper to include preprints of published articles
Uh,
or preprint published articles?
Preprint. So this would mean accepted na si paper pero
Yeah,
hindi.
accepted and waiting for being published.
Yes. So um there are different stances on that one kasi accepted na siya, you're just waiting for it to be available. Now, and to, we're not saying no, pero meron kasi siyang konting concern. Kasi let's say you finish your masteral study, hindi pa available yung article, let's say, online. And
Mm,
this is a true scenario, there are experts or there are panel na yung mahilig mag-check ng literature if lumalabas
mm,
talaga yung sinasabi,
mm,
what if lang, hindi pa available yung article, tapos sinite mo na. How would you, how would you argue, no?
mm,
Kasi, wait, kasi sabihin mo, may access ako kasi binigyan ako ng friend ko. So, for the question of verification there, medyo mahirap pa.
mm,
Pero if you use it, pero meron ng parang target na date and you're looking at, oh, lalabas na pala siya ganito na date, and then my masteral study is way earlier, is way later, I think that would be okay. Kasi
mm.
there are thesis or there are articles na yung nakasulat pa na pre-print copy, yung hindi pa talaga yung final copy, then we can actually view them online na. Pero that's a rare
Mm.
thing na ngayon. Yeah.
I had this experience before, Sir Sian, that the preprints are already available in other academic social media. Say, for
Mm.
example, the academia or research gate.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
this is one way of the authors to actually tell to their audience that they have a upcoming publication and they
Yes,
are
yes.
willing to show them the preprints of that publication. Again, just be mindful of when these preprints will be available as a published article in the journal where it should be published.
Yeah.
And also, um, it is okay to use them. Okay, it is okay to use them as long as your readers can verify where it came from,
Yes.
because it is understood that the preprint article is already towards
Accepted.
printing
Yes.
or accepted.
Towards
Yeah.
final publication na. Pero yun lang, dapat may way of ensuring na,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Because
already
some
available.
preprints are just like given to you, but it's not available in an online database. So those that are available in online database, such as, for example, the ResearchGate, where the viewers can actually view the paper as a preprint, then that I think that is
Yeah.
okay. But if it is just given to you as a preprint personally, and then the viewers cannot, or the readers cannot find where the article should be read from, then it is a gray area whether you can use it or not.
Yeah. Thank you, Miss J.
Oh,
Yeah.
also, if you have preprints as authors, you can use it as uh how do you call this, Cersei? And when somebody asks you for the data or for the article, but your publication company does not allow it first before being, before being published, then you can send it as a personal copy, but tell them that don't use it yet in their
Yes, 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 yes.
researches.
Oo, parang supplement lang. Yes.
Oh, supplement lang. They understood that there is this data and it will be coming out at this specific dates. But
Mm-mm.
ask them not to publish their paper first as long as that preprint was not officially published.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think that is all of the question for this afternoon. Very interesting and also very interesting topic. Congratulations so much, Sir Sian. Nanggigigil ako. So, our next section of this program is the giving of the certificate of appreciation to our speaker. And may I call on our coordinator, Prof. Nan, to give the certificate. Yeah, and we'll also be ending the live stream at this moment.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sir Cian, again for a very informative and also productive afternoon listening to your ABCs in RL. It's really good too. Okay, so again, Sir Cian, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon on behalf of the UP Cebu teaching and learning resource center, and also the Master of Education program still here in the University of the Philippines, Cebu. We extend our deepest gratitude for your valuable contribution for this event. So as what you can